The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation, the Delphi murders of Abby Williams and Libby German. Richard Allen was accused and convicted in the trial last year, but now some of the evidence is finally being made public. Here's the story. Richard Allen was arrested and convicted of the murders of 13-year-old Abigail Williams and 14-year-old Liberty German on February 13, 2017 in Delphi, Indiana. It was a high-profile case that took years to solve, and a big part of the evidence against Allen were incriminating confessions. But when he was first detained by investigators, he denied doing it in an interrogation recorded on video.
That's the round right there. It hadn't been out there very long. That is Liberty's foot. It's within 6 inches of one of the dead girls' bodies.
There's no way.
There is.
I'm telling you, there's not.
How did that round get there, Rick?
I don't know how the round got there. What I'm telling you is, if that is truly what you're saying it is, it's not my round.
So that's the initial interrogation of Richard Allen, who's been convicted. But and this is a case involving confessions, but initially he is denying all of this. And now we're taking a look at some of this evidence for the very first time. I want to play more from this initial police interview. And this is a moment that I think is really significant and really important in terms of trying to figure out what exactly is going on in his mind in the moment, because his wife is there. And apparently investigators had been feeding his wife with a lot of information, and then she comes into the interrogation room and the two of them are alone together. Camera's still rolling, still recording their interaction. Let's take a close look.
Yeah. It's all right, babe. It's gonna be all right. They're trying to tell me that you actually believe that I did it. And I just can't believe that.
Trying to figure out why there's a bullet out there.
I know. Do you think I'm not? And that's what I told him. But I can't explain something I don't understand. I tried to explain to him that there's no way that a bullet from my gun was at a murder scene, because it didn't happen. I didn't even have my gun that day I went out. You know me. You know this isn't something I could do. And I know that you know that. You don't have to tell me that, I know. They really think I did this. And they want me to believe that I know you know I didn't do this. I guess that's what I'm saying. I don't know what they're trying to do here, but I'm not going to say something that's not true, and I can't explain something that I don't understand. The only way for me to explain it is that I don't know, because I'm saying it's not possible. There's no way that a bullet from my gun ended up at a murder scene. I didn't murder anybody. I didn't help somebody murder anybody. You know, I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you. I know you know me. I know you know that I didn't do this. Had anything to do with it. They talk about scheming.
But were you on the bridge?
I told them I was on the bridge. I went out to the first trestle.
Oh, okay.
That first
I
thing
don't remember you telling me that. You told me, so I told you you weren't on it. But I didn't.
It doesn't, hon, you're not in any trouble. You didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. Huh?
I didn't know you were on it. I'm sorry.
Well, don't worry about it.
You told me you weren't.
Huh?
You told me you weren't, so I just was.
No, I told you that I walked.
Okay.
Fascinating, this interaction. She's telling him that you said you weren't on that bridge. And that's when his voice raises a little bit. There was discussion of this bullet, but this is a stabbing case. The reason the cartridge is important because they're saying it's an unfired round that cycled through his gun. And they tried to prove through marks on the gun that on the cartridge that it went through his gun. It was disputed by the defense, but that's what the jury believed. So, but let's get back to this interaction. Richard Allen and his wife in the interrogation room brings us to our first question in our investigation, which is, what does Richard Allen's conversation with his wife reveal? What does it reveal about him, about what happened, about their relationship, everything that's going on here? With us, Court TV senior producer. She has covered this case from the beginning and was at the trial. Barbara McDonald is here. And retired police officer after 2 decades, expert in police interviews and suspect body language. He now trains investigators. Dr. Mike McCutcheon is with us as well. Great to have you both here. Barbara, what are your initial reactions to this interaction? Because the wife was not a witness in the case, was she?
She was on the witness list, but was not called by either side. So this is his second interrogation. This is the one that led directly into his arrest at the conclusion of this interrogation. In fact, just minutes after that exchange with his wife, she leaves the room. Jerry Holman comes back in. He's a lieutenant with the Indiana State Police. He yells at Rick a bit about the evidence, and Rick says, you know what, I'm done talking about this. Arrest me. And that's what happens. And it's really interesting to see Richard Allen like this, because this is a very different man than we saw sitting in court every day for his trial. He looks very different than he did in many of the videos that we saw of him walking into the Carroll County Courthouse for hearings in his case. And he's very calm for somebody who has struggled with anxiety for most of his life. I was really struck in both of these interrogation videos by how calm he is and consistent in his denials. Vinny?
All right, Dr. Mike McCutcheon, we hear the words, but what is his body telling us?
You know, liars want to convince, truth tellers want to convey. A couple of things. When she comes in, now this is the first time she's seeing him, and he doesn't deny it. He doesn't say, I didn't do it. He uses a lot of phrases that we think are good denials. He's like, I didn't have my gun that day. I couldn't have done this. You know me. He's trying to convince her that he didn't do it. He's not telling what happened. He's trying to convince her. So those sound like really good denials. He's like, you know me. I'm not even gonna. You know me. You know, he's not saying, I did not do this. There is one time he says, I didn't do it. But the whole time he's trying to convince. But when he first starts talking to her, he covers his mouth. He does this. He's like, you know, I didn't do this. And then he talks like this, trying to like protect those words as he's saying it. But his words and his body language with her are fascinating. For me, I just get that. He is trying to convince her. He is not conveying his message that he didn't kill anybody. It's pretty clear in my mind.
Let's take a look at another moment where the volume is raised quite a bit. This is Richard Allen in the police interview, and there is a very loud exchange.
There is no way that evidence is going to show that I did this.
Here, Rick.
You got one piece of evidence that I can't explain.
Multiple. I'm not showing you my whole
hand here.
I don't care. I'm telling you, I'm done talking.
And now you're going to drag your wife and your daughter through this because you're too bullheaded to get out in front of this and admit that you made a mistake. And whatever the happened out there, we'll never know because you're too big of a. Go ahead.
So tell you I did something.
Tell me
that I
truth.
didn't do.
The truth, Rick. I don't want to know.
I've told you the truth, and you don't want to hear it. You're gonna pay for what you're doing to my wife.
What am I doing?
You want to with me, with me, but you leave my wife out of this. Leave me out of it.
No, you're involved in this. You're around there, Rick.
No, it's not.
I can see you're getting pissed off. I understand.
I am pissed off. Did you not see my wife?
Did you not see these two girls dead? No, that's what happened. You got pissed off, Adam. You dragged them down a hill, and you killed them.
I didn't.
Don't tell me you didn't.
I didn't kill anybody.
Bullshit. I'm upset for a reason, not
because you guys are trying to kill somebody.
You're trying to tell me that I'm not making this round up, Rick. It is what it is.
I'm done talking. Arrest me.
Barbara, this is some exchange. This is the grand finale, right?
It is, and you didn't hear Jerry Holman's words there, but when Rick says, arrest me, he says, happy to. And then we don't see what happens next. At trial, they read the transcript of the remaining portion of that video that included the arrest, but we did not receive that in our list of exhibits that I requested from the court.
Let me ask you, Dr. Mike McCutcheon, what do you think of this interview technique and this big grand finale here before the arrest?
Well, the two things stood out. One, horrific interviewing technique. When we get pushed against, we push back. Research has shown over and over and over again the tough guy tactics do not work. And it didn't. You saw that he was actually giving us stuff in the beginning when we were talking. And then when the investigator's yelling at him, then he's like, fine, forget it. I'm all done talking. Arrest me. So that's separate. But one thing I thought he said right at the beginning is we're going to listen to what he says. And he says, you have no evidence to convict me. That's, he thinks, a truthful statement. He's not saying, no, I didn't kill these girls. He says, you don't have enough evidence to convict me. And he's probably thinking that's right. It's not until he's being pushed against and where he's being yelled at where he says, I didn't do it, because he's being pushed against. Terrible interview technique.
Yeah, that looked like what we see on TV sometimes when they start
it was silly.
Screaming at the guy. The only thing that didn't happen was he didn't break the chair or his partner didn't come over and pull him back a little bit. Okay, Barbara McDonald, Dr. Mike McCutcheon staying with us. Coming up next, which is more credible, Richard Allen's denial or his confession?
I don't care how stressed out I get. I'm not going to admit to something that I had nothing to do with.
I'm not asking you to do that. I'm not trying to trick you.
I didn't.
The Court TV Podcast will return.
What were you doing on the bridge? Well, how did your round get there? And why did you kill these two girls? And why were you involved in this? What was your involvement?
I had no.
I don't think. Listen, Rick. I don't think you're the one that killed them. I don't think you're the one that stuck the knife in them. Well, are you?
I didn't.
Are you that guy?
Really?
Are you? I'm asking you.
Anybody that knows me knows I could never, even if I wanted to, do something like that. That's not who I am.
Then what happened?
I can't tell you. How do you expect me to tell you? You want me to make up a story?
Richard Allen, part of his denial in his initial questioning, his initial interrogations in this case, but at trial, this was a confession case. Prosecutors argued and presented evidence that he admitted to the Delphi murders. I want you to take a listen to one of those instances. This is a prison call from Richard Allen to his wife. And remember, we saw his wife in there, and he told her in person, right before he got arrested, that, you know me, I didn't do this, I didn't do this. Now this is a prison call when he is incarcerated on these charges. Take a listen.
Well, I need to tell you something anyway.
Okay. Are you sure you want to talk to me over the phone?
I think I have to.
Okay.
I need you to know that I did this.
What? No. No, you didn't, dear. There's no way. There's no way, dear.
Love me.
Dear, there's no way.
So that's one of the alleged confessions in all this that the jury believed, which brings us to the next question in our investigation, because we've heard the denials as well. Which is more credible, Richard Allen's denial or confession? Still with us, Barbara McDonald and Dr. Mike McCutcheon. All right, Barbara, give us some context surrounding these confessions, these jailhouse call confessions, especially this first one.
Yeah, so that happened on May the 10th of 2023 after he had been in custody for nearly 6 months. And this was about a month after he had been diagnosed as being psychotic and had received his first involuntary injection of an antipsychotic medication about 3 weeks prior to this phone call being made. The day after this phone call was made, in the prison logs, they reported him as being paranoid and depressed and hopeless. And his condition had not improved from that first Haldol injection that he received of that medication. He received another one about a week after this phone call. And I think, Vinnie, you have another clip we're going to play, and that phone call also happened on the same day. It was a separate call, but that's also on May 10th of 2023.
Okay, Dr. Mike McCutcheon, let's play that second one, and then I want to hear from you sort of an analysis of the denials versus these confessions. Let's listen.
Honey?
Yes.
Because I may have to spend the rest of my life here, or...
Stop talking about it, please. That's not true. Okay?
Okay, Dr. Mike McCutcheon, what are your thoughts here? The denial versus the confession.
So I'll start with the sentence the phrase that I used in the previous segment. Liars want to convince, truth tellers want to convey. And this one, he's not trying to convince her. He's not coming up with all these crazy ideas and saying, you know me, you know. He just says very straightforward, I'm conveying my message. I did this. And in the phone calls to his wife, he's very straightforward. He says, I need you to know I did this. In other phone calls, or I don't know if it's in the same phone call or the first to the second, but he's very straightforward. He says, I need you to know I did this. I hope you still love me. I did this. He's very straightforward. He's conveying what he wants. He's not trying to convince her. He's not coming up with all these scenarios and you know me better than this and that. It's just straightforward. So to me, this is not a false confession. We know that false confessions do happen. Usually it's because of sleep deprivation or poor interview techniques or isolation during an interview, a 12-hour interview or something like that. This isn't the case here. So I think his confession to me is very straightforward.
And anything regarding in his denial, he's constantly putting his hands out and his palms up. Is that a tell in any way as he's doing that during his denial?
Well, the hands do two things. If our hands are like this is a safe thing. This is like, whoa, hey, I'm here to help. If the hands point down, that's more of a power move. So it's something that we're like, look, I didn't do this. And so you put your hands forward to show dominance. That's kind of like the steeple. And you say, hey, no, look, I didn't do that. This is, oh, hey, I'm here to help. And so we'll see that a couple of times where using his hands, he's trying to be like, hey, I'm just here. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't. He's trying to show that he is, I'll say, not dangerous in that situation. But it's his demeanor in the first and the second one are dramatically different. They're polar opposite.
So, Barbara, give us an idea of how many times there were confessions from Allen in these phone calls.
I forget the exact number they gave, but they said that there were dozens. It was something like 60 or more phone calls contained confessions. And that was out of about 750 phone calls that the detective had listened to throughout Richard Allen's incarceration leading up to his trial. So not all of his calls contained that information. There were about 7 of them that were played in court. And not all the calls were to his wife. Some were to his mother.
Let me ask you, Dr. Mike, do you trust a confession more or less from someone who's incarcerated?
That's a good question. It would depend on the circumstances of the incarceration. I would trust it more because in the courts look at when you're incarcerated, that is your environment. So it's not like when you're being isolated in an interview room and you've been alone for 3 or 4 hours, you're deprived of food or you're deprived of sleep, or you have like that gentleman, hammering at him over and over, trying to convince him, or being shown false evidence. Like we know that those things could lead to a false confession, and he's in his own environment. He's initiating the contact. He's actually confessing to it when his wife is saying, "No, you didn't." And he's saying, "Yes, I did." "You know that? No. Why are you saying that?" "Because I did it." That's very, very, very different than if it were something that were coerced. So I would take that confession as his word on that. I don't have an issue with that. Oh,
go ahead, Barbara.
Vinnie, if I may, he was in solitary confinement. He was in one of 4 cells in the prison that he was in for 13 months. No prisoner had ever been held in that cell for that long before. Previously, it had been 10 days to 2 weeks. He was there 13 months. Lights on 24/7, camera on him 24/7, all the time. And he had suicide companions who started out as other inmates and then became other prison workers who sat at the door of his cell all the time and literally wrote down on a piece of paper everything he said and did that entire time. And that all got reported back. So that's how he was living when those calls made. And he had already been living that way for almost 6 months by the time these calls happened.
All right.
Yeah, that's significant.
Yeah, that is significant, and I'm glad Barbara was able to bring that point up. Barbara's going to stay with us. Dr. Mike McCutcheon, thank you so much. Up next, is the crime scene consistent with a single killer?
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.
I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the Delphi murders. Richard Allen is already serving a life sentence for the crime, but now some of the evidence is being made public for the first time, making many take a second look at the case. On February 13, 2017, 13-year-old Abigail Williams and 14-year-old Liberty German vanished while hiking the Monon High Bridge Trail in Delphi, Indiana. The following day, their bodies were discovered near Deer Creek, sparking a years-long investigation. A crucial piece of evidence was a video recorded on Liberty's phone, capturing a man instructing the girls to go down the hill. This individual became known as Bridge Guy and became the primary suspect. In October of 2022, Richard Allen, a local resident, was arrested and charged with their murders. Evidence included a .40 caliber bullet found between the victims linked to Allen's firearm and multiple confessions he made while incarcerated. Despite his defense citing mental health issues, Allen was convicted in November of 2024 and sentenced to 130 years in prison. I want to take a look at something else that has been released from the public evidence in the case, which is a diagram of the crime scene itself. As you take a look, you can see the two victims, Abby and Libby. You can see some spots of blood in the various areas, and you see where the tree was. And one of the bodies has no clothes on, the other does. And from the beginning, something everyone's been talking about is like, how did they end up there? From the bridge to this area, across the creek, etc., and end up where they ended up. And that image there, what does it tell us? That brings us to the next question in our investigation. It's all about the crime scene. Is the crime scene consistent with a single killer? Could one person do what was done and leave the scene the way it was found? And joining us, Court TV senior producer, she's covered the case from the beginning, was at the trial, Barbara McDonald is here, and criminal defense attorney and host of the Defense Diaries podcast, and he was also in the courtroom for Richard Allen's trial. Bob Motta is with us. Barbara, looking at that scene there, I want to show some footage we have of the bridge area leading there. I think we have some video showing us that I think was used at the trial. And when we take a look at that, can you explain to us what we're looking at here and then put it in reference to where the children were found?
Yeah, so this is a video that the state introduced showing the route that they believe Richard Allen would have taken from where his car was parked across the Freedom Bridge, along the trails, and this is the improvements. This is what the old Monon High Bridge area still looks like. The first part was the improvements. Now we're headed to the south side of that bridge, and that's where Abby and Libby were walking towards when they encountered this man. And this is the area where that video that Libby made was recorded, right in this area. Now, this video that you're looking at on your screen is from 2024, so 7 years after Libby's video was recorded. So if it looks different, this is the area looking down the hill. This was also shot in mid-February to give you an idea of the tree cover. And then you can see that access road down there, and that is Brad Weber's driveway. That is where they believe that when Weber was coming home from work in that white van, Richard Allen saw that van, got spooked, decided to change course. Instead of assaulting the girls on that same side of the creek, he instead marched them across the creek and killed them on the opposite side, which was Ron Logan's property.
Okay, Bob Motta, I think a big argument made by prosecutors from the beginning, because they found this bullet at the scene. Now, this was a stabbing case, but they found the bullet, and they believe they were able to link it to Richard Allen's gun. That's what they're saying. Is that crucial? Was that crucial for prosecutors to try to prove that one person could control these two teenagers and get them to where they ended up?
Yeah, I think for the state it was critical because I think everybody probably thought, all right, well, how is one probably older guy somewhere in his 20s to 40s controlling two teenage girls, but for having a weapon, namely a gun? I think that was always kind of the thought process going into the trial when we didn't know specifically if there was a gun involved or not. I think we all had an idea that a gun wasn't used in the actual homicides. You know, and we know from the story that the state put forward at trial, you know, in terms of what they're saying they heard on that video that we've now all seen, you know, they're very clear that they said that they hear a gun rack, which means that casing would have popped out on the bridge. So I guess the question becomes for me, well, how did that particular piece of ammunition get found at the crime scene, which is down the hill, across the creek, and hundreds of yards away from where they're claiming the gun was racked? So, you know, for them, it was a really big piece of evidence. I don't know how much weight the jury ended up giving it in terms of it being significant agreement between the weapon that was found at Richard Allen's home and the actual round itself, for various reasons, probably, which we don't need to get into here. But, you know, I just don't know at the end of the day how much weight that particular piece of evidence was given. But in terms of how critical it was for the state's story and theory, it was very, very important for them.
Well, I think Richard Allen had an explanation as to how that cartridge could have ended up at the scene or in the possession of investigators. Let's take a listen.
Either you had that gun or somebody had that gun. There's no way that round gets on that property where these two girls were killed without that gun being there. And you're there, your car's there, witnesses say...
There is no way a round from my gun was anywhere near the girls, the bridge. It just didn't happen.
So, Bob, what's your bottom line here about that crime scene? Is it consistent with a single killer?
I've never thought that it was. When you kind of look at the diagram itself, I mean, that speaks volumes. And we heard testimony at trial in terms of what was brought out in cross-examination, that where Libby's body was ultimately found and where you see the larger pool of blood towards down beyond Abby's feet there, that larger circle, that is actually Libby's blood, which would signify that that's where Libby was injured, right there, and that there were no drag marks between where that pool is and where Libby's final resting place is, which, if you're thinking about one person moving her, that's difficult for me to wrap my mind around, in terms of we don't know which direction her head was facing. If her head was facing south, that means that the killer would have had to turn her body around to get her situated so that her head was facing north. And with there being no drag marks in between that pool of blood and that tree, to me, it's very difficult to reach the conclusion that one person could have done that. I mean, what are you talking, like a fireman's carry of Libby, who I think weighed somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 plus pounds. She was a bigger girl. Richard Allen himself is 5'4", 5'5", you know, so he's not a big strapping guy. It would have been difficult. And the other thing for me that really sticks is that if they cross the river, the creek, okay, we're talking, it's February. I understand it was a untypically warmer day than it typically is. However, it was still early February. The creek was high and the water was cold. The clothes would have been wet still when they found the body the next day. Like, where's the time that the clothes dry if the path was, in fact, that creek? You know, that's always been something that's really kind of haunted me in terms of how they ended up on that side of the creek, because I just don't see clothes drying in 30-degree weather overnight when they'd be soaking wet from crossing that creek. I mean, there's a lot of things with it that just really don't add up to me.
All right, Barbara and Bob are going to stay with us. Oh, go ahead, real quick.
I was just going to say that they don't think that he was there at the scene beyond 3:30 p.m. So from 2:13 when they were abducted on the bridge until 3:30, everything that happened at the scene had to have happened.
Still to come, is this Richard Allen's car?
The question needs to be, is that you?
This is the Court TV Podcast.
And this is a picture that was taken with the phone of one of the girls. Okay, I understand that. And the question needs to be, is that you? If it was taken with the girl's phone, that is absolutely, I mean, it's not me, but I never have met these girls before, so even if I thought it looked like me, if it was taken with the girl's phone, there's no way it could be. I've never met him. I've never seen him.
There's Richard Allen denying that he is the bridge guy as he takes a look at that still frame from that video. Not the only video that was significant in the case, right? So there was also video of a car driving towards the trails. And here are some of those images of the car that they say was driving towards where the trails were, and they are saying this is Richard Allen's car. Apparently he had a Ford Focus, a black Ford Focus, and they say this is a black Ford Focus. You can see it's in the spotlight there, the back left. Now we also have an image with a time stamp on it. Let's take a look at that. And the time of this is significant as well. Well, there it says 14:21:39, which, you know, when you subtract 12 from it, puts you at 2:21 in the afternoon. But apparently they claim that it was not correct, that the time on the timestamp was not correct. And like everything else in this case, everything's just a little off. You know, the video's a little grainy. You can't quite see the bridge guy's face. You can't quite see exactly what kind of car this is, and you don't know the precise time because apparently there's a problem with that as well. But they argued and successfully argued about that video to incriminate Richard Allen, which brings us to the next question in our investigation. And it's all about the video right there. Is this Richard Allen's car? Is that the Ford Focus, the black Ford Focus? And is that him arriving at the trails just in time to abduct and murder these two innocent girls? Still with us, Barbara McDonald and Bob Mata. I think we have a split screen because I don't even know what a Ford Focus looks like a 2016, you know. So we have a split screen here. On the right, we found the car that is described as his, and then on the left is the surveillance video. And I guess there is definitely a similarity. It's not inconsistent with it. Barbara, how else are they establishing that it's his car, and what's the significance of the timing of all that?
Well, if you recall, his car was supposedly backed in at the old CPS building, which was still standing back in 2017, had been torn down after that, and is now just an empty field. But some of the witnesses had said they saw a black car backed in like it was hiding its license plate, was how they characterized it. And so they found this video on this Hoosier Harvest Store camera. They say it's 54 minutes off, so it's actually at 1:27. And this is Richard Allen arriving from the west, headed east to that lot on 300 North. But in Richard Allen's interrogations, he indicated he had parked somewhere else and would not have taken this route. Steve Mullen, who at the time of the trial was the prosecutor's investigator, he is once again the Delphi City Police Chief, he testified that he went to the CVS when Richard Allen was working and saw Richard Allen's car backed into a parking spot at the CVS where he was working, took a picture of it, and Steve testified that the hubcaps on Richard Allen's car match the car in that little bit of grainy video there. But it's hard to say, you know, it's not a clear picture. And like you said, Vinny, none of these images really give us a definitive look that we can all agree on.
It's like everything else in this case. Hey, Bob, what are your thoughts about this video, the significance of it, and demonstrating that it is, in fact, his car?
Well, we never saw the video, like everything on this case, everything else in the case. We didn't see the full video. They showed us. I don't even know if they got the full video. What we saw were these stills, these very stills that we're looking at. I don't know if when they went to the Hoosier Harvest Store that they actually got the entire video. I mean, to me, you know, look, I'm a defense attorney. You can't make that thing out. Like you said, at best, the most you can say, it's not inconsistent with the Ford Focus. I mean, can anybody actually sit there and say that it is Richard Allen's car? I don't think so. One of the bigger things that they kind of focused on were the wheels. If you can see in this picture that you have up there, Vinny, you can see daylight in between kind of the spokes of the wheels. that was a big thing for the state. That was one of the things they said, look, that's one of the ways that we could make out it's Richard Allen's car, because you can kind of see the light through the tires themselves. But in terms of being able to really identify it from that distance with it being that grainy, I mean, you just can't do it. I mean, we're talking about somebody's life, and that being one of the key pieces of evidence. Then when you contrast that with what Richard Allen said during his interviews, he didn't drive down 300 North. Never did. Well, that wasn't his route. When he would go to the trails, he always came in through town. Now, when I was down in town, Barbara and I were both in town. We were both out to the trails. You could leave downtown Delphi, the little town square where the courthouse was, and you could drive maybe 4 blocks, and there was a road that used to be an access road that you could drive up to the other side of the Freedom Bridge and park. Now, I went out there with Kathy Allen, and I asked Kathy, I said, where did you guys always park when you came out to the trails? And she walked me right down to where they would always park, and it used to be at the end of that access road that now has large boulders that you can't drive up straight from town, straight up there. So, but it was not what they're determining, the old CPS building. It's not that area. It's a different area completely. So, it's like everything with this case, to me, it remains a mystery. Now we've got a convicted guy who's in prison for 130 years, and we're all still talking about this case because nobody trusts his conviction.
Let me ask you, Barbara, if you have the video of the car arriving, there should be video of it leaving. Why? Is there an explanation as to why that video doesn't exist?
No, the other thing that should be on that same video, Vinnie, is the muddy and bloody suspect walking back to his car. We had a witness, Sarah Carbaugh, testified. She saw him walking on 300 North just before 4 p.m., and he was covered in mud and blood and looked like he had just slaughtered a pig, she said at one point. And that's not captured on this video either.
All right. Big thank you tonight. Barbara McDonald doing great work as always, and Bob Mata, incredible insight. Thank you both so much. Now, the evidence being released is just some of the evidence in this case. All this evidence is part of public records from a public trial. But like so many aspects of this case, authorities in Indiana are not very transparent. Public records requests and procedures are much more difficult in Indiana and are not fulfilled completely, which from my perspective is really consistent with the entire manner in which this case was conducted, which has led, unfortunately, to further mistrust of this system and raised more questions. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.
There you have it. If you want to see more in-depth reporting on the latest true crime stories, you can see me every weeknight, 8 p.m. Eastern on Closing Arguments. Thank you so much for downloading. And as always, please don't forget to hug the kids.
This podcast is a production of Court TV. Go to CourtTV.com for more content, trials on demand, and to find out how to watch Court TV in your area.